Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary, but for me, it became a hunting ground. Imagine waking up in a tent only to find your brother's sleeping bag empty, and as you peek through the zipper, you see a stranger sitting by your dying campfire, staring directly at you with a smile that says he's been waiting for you to wake up. The Oregon summer heat of that year remains etched in my memory like a scar. I was only 8 years old, the middle sibling of 3. My older brother, Scott, was an accomplished Eagle Scout, and my younger brother was just starting his journey in the Cubs. For some reason, my parents never pushed me into the Scouts, a fact that bred a deep, gnawing jealousy within me. I watched with envy as Scott prepared for weekend campouts in the wilderness, practicing his survival skills. To a child's imagination, our backyard wasn't just a patch of grass. It was a vast, untamed frontier. Our neighborhood was spacious, with yards that bled into one another without the restriction of fences. Instead, dense thickets of brush and ancient, towering trees served as the only boundaries, adding a sense of isolation and mystery to the property. One evening, I finally hatched the plan that I thought would bridge the gap between me and my brothers: a backyard campout. My parents, ever supportive, played along with our adventure. They set up the fire pit, and we spent the early evening roasting marshmallows under a canopy of stars. My 4-year-old brother joined us for the treats, but because of his age, my parents took him inside when the moon climbed high. Now, it was just Scott and me in the tent. We retreated into our sleeping bags, the glow of our Game Boy SPs providing a flickering sanctuary against the creeping shadows of the woods. I remember the rhythmic clicks of Super Mario Bros. 2, a game I was obsessed with but could never quite master. Eventually, Scott's breathing turned heavy and rhythmic as sleep claimed him. I, however, remained restless. The sleeping bag was lumpy, the ground was unforgiving, and the silence of the wild backyard felt heavy. After what felt like hours of tossing and turning, I finally drifted into a fitful slumber. I woke up suddenly, disoriented by the pitch-black surroundings of the tent. My first instinct was to reach out for Scott, but my hand hit nothing but cold nylon. His sleeping bag was empty. A wave of fear washed over me. I assumed he had grown tired of the hard ground and retreated to the comfort of the house. The thought of being alone in the dark tent was more than my 8-year-old nerves could handle. I decided to follow him inside, but I was too terrified to simply run blindly through the yard. I reached for the zipper, my hands trembling. I pulled it down just an inch or two, enough to peek outside and ensure the coast was clear. The fire had died down to glowing embers, casting a faint, sickly orange light over the yard. And there, sitting in one of our folding chairs by the pit, was a figure. It wasn't Scott. It was a grown man dressed in dark clothing, sitting perfectly still. He wasn't looking at the woods or the dying fire. His body was angled directly toward the tent, his gaze fixed on the very spot where I was peeking out. I gasped, the sound feeling like a gunshot in the quiet night. I zipped the tent back up as fast as I could and scrambled deep into my sleeping bag, pulling the fabric over my head as if that thin layer of polyester could protect me from whatever was outside. I lay there, paralyzed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I desperately wanted to scream for my dad, but the terror had stolen my voice. I knew deep down that if it were my father, he would have called out to me the moment I poked his head out. This man was a predator, and he was waiting for the right moment to strike. That was when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of the metal chair shifting against the grass. He was getting up. The air inside the tent suddenly felt like it was running out. Every breath I took sounded like a roar in the oppressive silence of the backyard. I stayed pressed against the far corner of the tent, my eyes fixed on the silhouette of the zipper. The metallic scrape of the folding chair had stopped, replaced by the soft, rhythmic thud of footsteps on the grass. They weren't hurried, they were deliberate. Each one felt like a hammer striking my chest. I waited for the tent to shake, for a hand to rip through the fabric, but instead the footsteps circled the perimeter of our small nylon shelter. He was doing a lap like a predator inspecting a cage. Then the movement stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I could feel a presence standing just inches away from the back of my head, separated only by a thin layer of waterproof coating. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated toward the fire pit. I summoned a fragment of courage and crawled back toward the front flap. I had to know if he was gone. I reached for the zipper again, my fingers slick with cold sweat. I pulled it down just enough to see out, but the yard was empty. The chair was vacant. The fire had faded into gray ash. Just as I began to exhale in relief, I heard a sound that made my skin crawl. A low, raspy whistle coming from the dark tree line at the edge of the property. It was a melody, short, repetitive, and horribly cheerful. It didn't sound like a man who was lost or confused. It sounded like someone playing a game. I realized then that Scott wasn't in the house. If Scott had gone inside, he would have left the back porch light on for me. The back of the house was pitch black. My heart plummeted. Was Scott okay? Had this man done something to him while I was asleep? The whistling stopped abruptly. From the shadows of the large oak tree near the brush, I saw a pale hand emerge and wave slowly at the tent. It was a rhythmic, mocking gesture. I didn't wait for a second longer. I screamed, a high-pitched, primal sound that tore through the quiet night. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I scrambled out of the sleeping bag, fumbled with the zipper until it jammed, and eventually just threw my weight against the tent wall until the stakes ripped out of the ground. I bolted toward the back door of the house, my bare feet hitting the cold, dewy grass. I didn't look back. I slammed my shoulder into the sliding glass door, sliding it open and screaming for my parents. The lights in the kitchen flickered on, and my father came running down the hallway, confused and half asleep. I shrieked that someone was out there, pointing toward the dark yard. My father grabbed a heavy flashlight and stepped onto the porch, sweeping the beam across the lawn. The yard was empty. The tent lay slumped on its side, one corner torn where I had burst out. My father walked all the way to the tree line, his light cutting through the fog, but there was no sign of the stranger. He checked the house and found Scott asleep on the living room sofa. He had come in hours earlier because he was bored and didn't want to wake me up. The police found nothing more than some flattened grass. I thought it was over, but the true terror began a month later at school. A man in a dark hoodie approached the playground fence and looked me dead in the eye. He didn't ask for the time. He whispered, "You forgot to zip the bottom of the tent, Chris." He knew my name. By the time I reached a teacher, the sidewalk was empty. To this day, I don't go camping because I know that man is still out there, waiting for someone to leave a gap in the door. Moving into my first home at the age of 21 was supposed to be the ultimate milestone of my independence. Living about 50 miles outside of Salem, Oregon, I was starting from scratch and needed everything to fill the empty rooms: furniture, kitchenware, and decor. Being on a tight budget, I spent my nights scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, looking for high-quality items I could haul in my Ford Raptor. One evening, I struck gold: a listing for a pristine charcoal gray sectional couch and a high-end Cannondale mountain bike for a fraction of their retail value. The seller was brief, almost mechanical in his responses, but he insisted that the pickup happen in the late evening, claiming he worked long hours. The address led me toward the coast, where the suburban streets give way to thick, ancient forests and driveways that disappear into hidden wealth. The drive was long and atmospheric, with the salty sea air mixing with the scent of pine. Finally, I reached the GPS destination: a massive, multi-million-dollar estate perched on a literal cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture, all glass and sharp angles, but something felt immediately off. Parked in the expansive circular driveway of this luxury mansion was a single, rusted-out Mercury Sable that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard rather than at a millionaire's front door. I pulled my truck up behind it, the engine idling as I scanned the house. Every single blind was drawn tight, and not a single light flickered from within. I stepped out, feeling the cold coastal wind bite through my jacket, and noticed a small, handwritten note taped to the front door. Doorbell broken. Please use back door. I followed the narrow stone path around the side of the house. The backyard view was breathtaking. The sun was just dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of blood orange and deep purple. I reached the sliding glass door at the rear and knocked firmly. Silence. I waited a few minutes and knocked again, then sent a message to the seller through the app. No response. I walked toward the edge of the cliff to take a photo of the sunset, trying to justify the long drive. When I finally turned back toward the house to leave, my heart skipped a beat. In the few minutes my back was turned, the entire atmosphere of the house had changed. Every single blind on the ground floor and the second story was now wide open, and in every single window stood a person. They were perfectly still, their faces pressed close to the glass, and as the last of the sunlight hit them, I realized they were all wearing the same wide, frozen smile. I stood frozen on the grass, my camera still gripped in my hand, as the fading light of the Pacific horizon cast long, distorted shadows toward the house. This wasn't just one person or a simple misunderstanding. There was a figure in every single visible window of the mansion. Some were tall, some were short, but all of them were deathly still, their palms pressed flat against the glass as if they were trying to feel the heat of the outside world. The wide, unnatural smiles on their faces didn't reach their eyes, which remained fixed on me with a predatory intensity. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I realized that if I had followed the note and entered through the back door, I would have walked right into the center of that silent, smiling circle. I didn't wait to see if the glass would hold. I turned and sprinted toward my Ford Raptor, my boots skidding on the gravel path. As I rounded the corner of the house, I glanced at the side window of the kitchen, the one closest to the driveway. A hand reached out and slowly lifted the blind just a few inches, revealing a pair of pale, unblinking eyes that tracked my every move. I fumbled with my keys, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it was painful. I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the truck into reverse, the tires screaming as I backed out of the circular drive. In the rearview mirror, I saw the massive front door of the mansion slowly creak open. A man in a dark suit stepped onto the porch, standing perfectly still with his hands in his pockets, simply watching me flee. I didn't stop driving until I reached the house of a neighbor named Tom, about half a mile down the road. When I told him what I had seen, he looked at me like I was insane, but then his face went pale. He knew the owner of the mansion, a man named Jim who was currently in Europe for business. Tom called Jim immediately, and Jim confirmed that he hadn't listed a single piece of furniture for sale and that the house should have been empty and locked. By the time the police arrived at the estate, the rusted Mercury Sable was gone. The house was dark once more, the blinds pulled tight, and every door was standing wide open. There was no sign of the statues, but the police found a single charcoal gray cushion sitting in the middle of the empty living room. A silent, chilling invitation to a deal that was never meant to be. The summer after my freshman year of college was supposed to be a period of mindless relaxation at my parents' estate in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. Their property was a sprawling piece of land that felt more like a private park than a residential lot. The centerpiece was a massive, custom-built in-ground pool, surrounded by a flagstone patio and a high-end pool house. Beyond the manicured lawn, the property dissolved into nearly half a mile of dense, old-growth woods. There were no trails, no neighboring fences, and no streetlights, just a wall of ancient oaks and maples that turned into a black void the moment the sun went down. My parents were away for the weekend, leaving me with the keys to the kingdom, so I decided to throw a midsummer bash for about 20 of my closest friends. The day started normally enough. Around noon, I was outside near the tree line, hauling bags of ice and setting up long folding tables for beer pong. The air was heavy and humid, the kind of heat that makes the woods feel silent and expectant. I was bending over to adjust a cooler when I heard it, a distinct, wet, throat-clearing cough. It was loud, human, and it came from the thick brush just 10 feet away. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I peered into the tangled greenery, expecting to see a neighbor or perhaps a hiker who had lost their way, but the woods were unnaturally still. There was no sound of retreating footsteps, No snapping twigs, just the oppressive hum of cicadas. I shook it off, telling myself it was probably a deer or a trick of the wind, but that feeling of being watched, that prickly sensation on the back of my neck, refused to leave me for the rest of the afternoon. As evening fell, the party kicked into high gear. The patio was bathed in the glow of submerged pool lights and string lanterns, and the sound of music drowned out the silence of the forest. With 20 people laughing, splashing in the pool, and moving in and out of the house, the earlier incident in the woods felt like a distant, foolish memory. By 1:00 a.m., the last of the cars had pulled out of the long driveway, and the house fell into a sudden, jarring quiet. I spent a few minutes doing a cursory sweep of the backyard, stacking chairs and making sure the grill was off. I distinctly remember walking to the heavy, sliding glass door that led into the kitchen. I slid it shut, turned the physical lock, and even engaged the overhead security bolt. I was exhausted, my brain foggy from the long day, and I headed upstairs to my bedroom, which overlooked the pool area. I had just drifted into that heavy first stage of sleep when a sound jolted me wide awake. It wasn't a small noise. It was a massive, echoing splash asterisk. It sounded like someone had taken a running leap and dove straight into the deep end of the pool. I sat up, my heart racing, and checked my phone. It was 2:14 a.m. I crept to the window and parted the curtains just enough to look down. The pool lights were still on, casting a shimmering turquoise glow across the patio. My blood turned to ice. There was a man in the pool. He wasn't splashing or playing. He was swimming incredibly smooth, professional laps from one end to the other. He moved with a terrifying calm, his dark hair slicked back, his strokes cutting through the water with rhythmic precision. I stood there, paralyzed, wondering which of my friends had doubled back for a midnight swim. But as the man reached the edge and turned, I realized I didn't recognize him at all. He was a complete stranger, and he was swimming in my pool as if he had waited all day for the water to be his alone. I stood there for a moment, my hand hovering over the light switch, debating whether to turn it on and reveal my presence or stay hidden in the shadows of my room. The man reached the shallow end, stood up, and slowly walked toward the steps. He was tall, with a lean, muscular build, and he was wearing nothing but dark swim trunks. He didn't look around nervously or try to hide. He moved with the entitlement of a homeowner. He grabbed a towel I had left on a lounge chair, wiped his face, and then did something that made my heart stop. He turned his head and looked directly up at my bedroom window. Even in the dim light, I could see his eyes. They were wide, dark, and completely devoid of any expression. He knew I was watching. Instead of running back toward the woods, the man began walking toward the house. I heard the wet, heavy thud of his bare feet on the wooden deck of the porch. Thud, drip, thud, drip. I raced to my bedroom door, making sure the lock was engaged, and then I heard the sound I dreaded most, the distinct metallic click and the long, smooth slide of the glass door downstairs. I knew I had locked it. I had checked the bolt myself, but the sound was unmistakable. He was inside. The silence of the house was now filled with the sound of wet footsteps moving across the hardwood of the kitchen, then onto the carpet of the living room, heading straight for the stairs. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice a frantic whisper as I gave the operator my address. "He's in the house," I breathed. "He's coming up the stairs." The footsteps were rhythmic and slow, unhurried by the threat of being caught. He reached the top of the landing and stopped. The hallway was silent for 5 agonizing seconds, and then I saw the shadows moving under my door as the hallway light blocked out. A soft, wet thud hit the wood of my door as he leaned against it. Then came 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. "It's me," a voice whispered from the other side. It was low, calm, and sounded like a man in his late 20s or early 30s, someone I had never heard before in my life. "Open the door." I shouted back that I was on the phone with the police and that they were minutes away. There was no scrambling, no cursing, and no panicked retreat. I heard him sigh, a long, disappointed sound, and then the wet footsteps began to recede. He walked back down the stairs, and a few seconds later, I heard the heavy thud of the front door slamming shut. When the police arrived, they found a trail of pool water that started at the back door, went up the stairs, and pooled directly in front of my bedroom door. They searched the woods with thermal cameras but found nothing. To this day, I still don't know how he got that door open, but I never swim alone at night, and I never ignore a cough in the woods.